Hello everyone and welcome to QualityOldHomm. Today we are making perhaps the final tier list for, at least for the units in Heroes of Might and Magic 3, Horn of the Abyss expansion, and this time we are rating all of the units. And the unit rating is based on single player, and in the background is functioning my How Good Is test series, where the units face several challenges and are tested, and also the costs and requirements are taken into consideration. Furthermore, the overall unit roster of a faction affects things a bit, so if the unit is very critical for that faction, then it will get a higher tier, and so on and so forth. But of course the battle capabilities are the most important aspect here, and those battle capabilities are based on weekly growth instead of cost efficiency, though costs are also taken into consideration. But without further ado, let's begin. First we have Kentaurs, and kind of a solid all-around tier 1 unit. What I like about it is speed, and otherwise rather nice unit as well. Then we have Gnolls. To be honest, if this was, I think for tier 1 tier list, it would go a bit higher, but I mean overall I don't like it. Really slow unit, and the stats are not that great either. Then we have Goblins. Pretty much the same applies to these guys, perhaps a slightly better number because higher tier in D, because they get higher numbers and the speed is a bit greater. Gremlins, well, yeah, you should conserve them for the upgraded variant. Halflings, I mean, really solid unit. Tier 1 shooter that can actually carry you quite far in a scenario, so really nice. Imps, I think they will go to D as well. Really bad unit, even though the speed is not horrible, but the stats otherwise are. Then we have Nymphs. I mean, kind of average tier 1 unit. What I like about them is that they move through teleportation, and the attack is rather great, but then again they cannot take too much beating, so perhaps strong C, weak B. Let's put them into weak B, at least for now. Peasants, yeah, they are good for skeleton transformer or necromancers. Then we have pikemen. Another rather average unit. Speed is rather low, but the stats are rather nice. Then we have pixies. I mean, rather solid unit. Move by flying, rather high speed. Of course, when someone sneezes in their direction, they will take casualties, but I think the speed actually makes them rather useful. If you can soak up the retaliation with some other unit, or for example one stack unit, then these guys can, or girls can, actually hit quite hard. So I would say they are one of the better unupgraded tier 1 units. Skeletons. I mean, this is rather a difficult unit, because if you use skeletons without being a necromancer or death knight hero, then they would go to D tier in my books. Then if you use them as necromancer or death knight, then they would go rather to S tier, especially regarding the later game, despite being rather slow. So as a compromise, I will give them a strong B, but I mean, my opinion is rather situational regarding that, whether you are playing with Necropolis or whether you are capturing Necropolis settlement. Then we have Troglodytes. I mean, not too much to write home about. Perhaps not quite as horrible as Gnolls, so weak C, probably. Centaur Captains. I mean, clearly one of the top contenders for best unit in tier 1. So I think they deserve a place in high A, and the main benefit of the unit is high speed, so that's really great. Allows many tactical maneuvers in battle map. Then we have Familiars, not quite as horrible as Imp, kind of feels average. The speed is rather nice, and the special ability is rather nice, but despite high growth, the stats are rather horrible, so only B tier from me. Then we have Gnoll Marauders. I mean, yeah, a bit better than standard Gnolls, but not too much. The one additional speed is nice, but it should have been 2. Then we have Halberdiers, one additional rather average tier 1 unit. I mean, decent enough, but nothing too much to write home about. Then we have Halfling, Grenadiers, and perhaps the best tier 1 unit. I mean, damage from 2 to 3, and it can ignore some of the enemy defense, and it has permanent luck. And the speed is rather great as well. So clearly S tier material, can carry quite far in a scenario. Then we have Hobgoblins. The stats are really bad still, but I think the speed increase is such a big one that it deserves a place in B tier. Infernal Troglodytes, yeah, a bit better than basic Troglodytes, not much, but well, the speed increase, stat increases are nice, so perhaps kind of average feeling unit. Perhaps, well, due to the growth, it kind of deserves a place in B tier, not C. Then we have Master Gremlins. Yeah, one rather strong tier 1 unit, though not quite on a par with Halfling Grenadiers or Kentaur Captains in my opinion, but rather strong still. Then we have Oceanids, another contender for good tier 1 unit. I think I will give them A. Once again, moved by teleportation, rather high attacking stats. Those are really nice, but when they start to take damage or casualties, they take them rather hard. Then we have Skeleton Warriors, and pretty much same applies to these guys as to Skeletons, so clearly S tier if you are playing with Necropolis, and D to C if you are playing with something else. So as a compromise, I will give them strong B. Then we have Sprites, and well, actually the main challenger for Halfling Grenadiers for best tier 1 unit. No Retaliation for tier 1 is really solid, but perhaps I think that the ranged unit will carry a bit further in the campaign. So if you face faster units, then these girls will be in a bit of trouble, but really good unit nonetheless. Then let's move to tier 2. First we have the worst unit in the game, Walking Dead. Well, actually, I'm not sure. I think Walking Dead are actually worse than Peasants, because Peasants don't cost you anything. Walking Dead do. And the upgrade to Zombies don't really improve things that much. So, yeah. Clearly both are D tier, Walking Dead perhaps even more so. Then we have Air Elemental. I mean, rather solid unit, even though the kind of the range of damage is rather high, so it would benefit quite a bit from Bless, and of course suffer quite a bit from Curse, but the speed is great, and the unit is actually surprisingly good. So I think it applies to all elementals that they are kind of trying to be on equal terms. But this is tier 2 and Earth Elementals are tier 5. So that practically affects things quite a bit, making this a solid unit, whereas Earth Elementals are practically the opposite. So let's give these guys strong A. Then we have Archers. I mean, solid missile unit, can be used in the early game, but for it to really shine, you should wait for the upgraded variant. So weak B from me. Then we have Boars. Yeah, another D tier unit. Overall, I think the neutral units don't do that well in the game. So there are some exceptions, and of course those higher tier units can be rather nice, but especially these lower tier units are rather trash. Then we have Crewmates. I mean, rather average tier 2 unit to average tier. Then we have Dwarves. I mean, the speed is just horrible, but at the same time the hit points and stats are rather decent. So I'm inclined to give them weak C, though I'm a bit tempted to put them into D because of the slow speed. But I mean, the growth and the stats are so good for tier 2 that I think I will give them C. Then we have Gogs. Another kind of basic shooter. I don't think they are really great, but once again, as they are shooter and can carry battles in early game without suffering casualties, so I think rather decent. So B tier. Then we have Harpies, rather weak unit in my books. You should wait for the upgraded variant for these girls once again. So yeah, C tier you shouldn't make. Then we have Leprechauns. I mean, these are actually surprisingly good for neutral units. Here I was disparaging these neutral ones, and then I'm giving these guys B tier. What's nice that they can cast some buffs for your units, and they actually perform surprisingly well in battle as well. So kind of solid B tier material. Then we have Lizardmen, another kind of basic shooter in my opinion, a bit better than Gogs or Archers, so decent B tier from me. And then we have, I think these are mechanics, yeah, engineers are there. Without their special ability to repair mechanical things, I would say they would go to perhaps C or D, but as they can repair things and thus can be rather crucial for factory builds, especially keeping going with those automatons, etc., etc., I think I will give them a decent B tier. Then we have Rogues, tier 2 units, which have that special perk that can be rather nice, but at the same time, the unit by fighting capabilities feels like tier 1 unit, so I will give it strong D, and that strong is only because of its special ability. Then we have Gargoyles, Stone Gargoyles. For them I will give weak B. I mean, flying is nice, growth can be rather nice, but overall in battle the unit doesn't feel quite sturdy, so weak B. Then we have Wolf Riders. Yeah, another unit where you should wait for the upgraded variant. So, I mean, the unit is rather squishy, 10 hit points for tier 2 unit is not much. So when it takes damage, it gets hit really hard. Then we have Battle Dwarves, another B tier unit. The speed is, once again, a thing I don't like, but overall the stats otherwise for tier 2 units are rather nice, plus the magic resistance. So yeah, I think solid B for these guys. Then we have Engineers. Because of the special ability, I will give them A tier. Without that, it would go to C. But as the special ability is kind of double that of Mechanics, I think it deserves one tier higher, and of course the stats are a bit higher as well. Then we have Harpy Hawks. I think they are the best, or among the top 2 or 3 best tier 2 units. So clearly S tier material, so basically non-retaliation attack, and it can pull back into its starting position. So basically, if you are in close enough range, it can act as a range unit in practice, and well, enemy will have tough time getting next to them, especially if you are defending, for example, a castle. Then we have Lizard Warriors. I mean, rather strong shooter. Can get Fortress going quite nicely in the early campaign, so I will give them A tier, rather solid stats for missile unit. Actually, I think in one-on-one they can beat Marksmen, which is rather nice, because Marksmen do have double attack. Then we have Magogs. I think this is a bit tricky one. I'm kind of inclined to give them strong B, mainly because of that AoE attack. If they didn't have that, it would be rather weak B, or even lower, because it's, well, costing more as its upgraded variant. But perhaps weak A, strong B, it's actually the only shooter that Inferno has, so perhaps because of that I will give it weak A. And that area attack is rather nice, especially as you can target it in HotA. Then we have Marksmen, or Crossbow, Marksmen, yeah. Double attack is always nice. I think I will give them A tier, perhaps on the weaker side, but A tier nonetheless. And, well, these guys will carry castle quite far in the early game, so the damage from the double attack can be rather devastating. But on the other hand, their stats are not that great, so when the enemy starts hitting back or shooting back, they will be in quite a bit of difficulties quite soon. Then we have Obsidian Gargoyles. I mean, the speed is rather great, and the growth is great. Then again, the price is rather on the higher side, and otherwise the stats are not that great, so I think strong B, somewhere around here. And then we have these Seamen, once again rather average feeling unit, perhaps a bit on the stronger side, so strongish B tier from me. Nothing special about that unit. Storm Elementals, I think a good contender for the best tier 2 unit, so I will give this unit S tier as well. Perhaps as the damage can range quite a bit, I think I will not give it, well, actually so can with Harpy Hawks. So yeah, let's put it somewhere around there. Higher than Sprites because, well, these can remain on the far side of the battlefield, whereas these must move forward to engage. Then we have Wolf Raiders. I mean, rather strong unit for tier 2, solid A in my books. The double attack is always nice, but I think the same applies as to Wolf Riders. When they start taking damage, they will suffer quite heavy casualties quite soon. Then let's move to tier 3. First we have Whites. In really small scale battles, that regeneration can be rather nice. Otherwise, the unit is rather trash, in my opinion, rather poor stats. Flying is nice, but not quite enough to compensate other, well, disabilities the unit has, or lack of abilities, however you want to put it. I think weak C will suffice for it. Then we have Armadillos, a unit that I don't like too much. So it feels clunky, it's rather slow. I think Factory can do quite a bit better. I will give it D tier, although strong D tier. Then we have Beholders, and once again, rather early game shooter unit is nice. And I think with no melee penalty, this unit actually feels rather strong. The growth is relatively decent, and compared to the Medusas that Dungeon has access, I think I would prefer these units over those. So let's put them rather in the mid of B tier, somewhere around here. Then we have Griffins. I mean, rather solid unit in my books. Those two retaliations are rather nice. Flying is nice as well. Of course, the construction chain is a bit tricky, so you need to get tier 4 dwelling before getting tier 3. The growth is nice, but perhaps that building chain affects things a bit adversely. So a bit on the weaker side of B tier over here. Then we have Hellhounds. I mean, solid enough unit. The speed is rather nice, but I think you should try to keep these guys out of battle, or at least from suffering casualties, so you can get the upgraded variant, which is great. So, because of that, perhaps the score should be a bit lower. Let's put them on the weaker side of B tier. Mummies, another neutral unit that's not quite good. I think I will give them C tier. The curse can be rather nice at some point, but really the unit doesn't have the stats of other tier 3 units in my books, so rather on the weaker side. Then we have Nomads, which can do actually, well, relatively well. That bonus on sand can be nice for the army. And the speed is great, but once again the stats are not that great, so I think I will give them high C, low B, something like that. Let's give them low B. Then we have Orcs, perhaps the by tier the worst shooter units in the game. However, it is a shooter unit on tier 3, so I cannot kind of give it D tier, even though it's quite bad. But because it can shoot, I think I will give it C, because, well, you can beat early game battles without suffering casualties with that unit, so that's the reasoning behind it, but not a good unit at all. Then we have Pirate. Yeah, Pirate, another shooter unit, rather limited amount of shots, no retaliation, attack is rather nice, but I don't think the stats are really that great, so perhaps on the weaker side of B tier. We have Royal Griffins. I mean, the speed is rather nice, no unlimited retaliations is nice, the damage range is rather big, so Bless and Curse will work rather effectively on this unit. Once again, the building path is a bit problematic for this unit, but I think I will nonetheless give it rather solid A, because it can do rather well in battles despite lacking some of the highest stats that tier 3 units can have. So somewhere around there. Then we have Serpent Flies. For this one, I think weak A, perhaps. Flying unit, the stats are not that great, but the growth is rather nice and it has that dispel ability. And, well, and of course, actually you should try to conserve these guys for the higher tier unit. So, B, A, I think I will give them B tier nonetheless. Then we have Stone Golems. The speed is just horrible, as with Dwarves, but these are tier 3 units, which is a bit more unforgiving. And I think I will give them D tier because of that. And, well, when or if they can reach battle, they can do rather nice, but overall I think you are better off with faster units. So the speed is clearly the Achilles heel of this unit. Then we have Water Elementals. I think they are, I mean, not good. They are rather slow on the slower side and they feel rather clunky. Of course, in battle they can do relatively well, but compared to other tier 3s, I'm not sure. Perhaps weak B, strong C. I think B tier is filling up quite a bit, so strong C. On the other hand, they do feel quite decent in battle, so let's give them weak B. Then we have Wood Elves. I mean, solid enough unit, missile unit, B tier. However, you should once again try to conserve them so that you can get the upgraded variant. Then we have Ice Elementals. For these, I think strong B. Oh, wrong unit. So, Ice Elementals, strong B. What I don't like about this unit, I mean, they feel rather doing relatively little damage next to Storm Elementals quite often. So that's a clear minus, and they lose their no melee penalty when they are upgraded those. So they do suffer when they are in melee, and the speed is not that great. So I mean, giving them A would be a bit too much. So strongest B from me. Then we have Wraiths. Some stats increase from white, but not too much. Of course, training enemy mana can be rather nice, but I don't think that warrants enough for B tier. The unit is rather squishy and takes casualties rather quickly and doesn't inflict too many casualties. Then we have Kerbery, perhaps a contender for one of the best tier 3 units. I mean, in my books it deserves a place in A tier, perhaps here. No retaliation attack is nice, and that 3-headed attack as well is rather nice, so I think A tier, strong A is rather well deserved. Then we have Corsairs, upgraded variant from Pirates, I mean, strong B. Once again, it has only 4 shots, and no retaliation attack is rather nice in melee, but the stats overall feel quite on the weaker side, so if the unit gets targeted, it starts taking casualties rather quickly. Then we have Dragonflies, and once again I think a contender for one of the best tier 3 units, especially in Fortress context. So the fastest unit of Fortress, that Dispel and Weakness can be rather nice, and well, the growth is rather nice at the same time. Perhaps the stats overall in battle are not that great, or that attack, defense and damage, but I think Fortress needs the unit quite a bit. So weak S tier from me. Then we have Evil Eyes, I mean strong B. A bit better than Beholders, that no melee penalty is rather nice as well, and the speed is nothing to be ashamed of for tier 3 units, so I mean strong B from me. But it doesn't feel quite on the upper echelons of tier 3 units, so perhaps giving A would be a bit too much. Or perhaps weak A, I don't know. Let's see about later, if I remember. Then we have Grand Elves. Double attack is always nice, and as this is Rampart's only missile unit, they need to rely these guys quite a bit. I think strong A, perhaps once again giving them S tier would be a bit too much, because the stats are not really that great when the enemy starts hitting back. So I think strong A would be rather nice for Grand Elves. Then we have Iron Golems. Well, the speed issues are mitigated somewhat, but still the unit is relatively slow, so I think lower B would suffice, even though they are rather nice when they get to battle. And actually one of the most cost-efficient units, if they are kind of pitted against each other so that they just go to melee. But that's not the case quite often, so giving them higher than low B would be a bit too much, in my opinion. Then we have Orc Chieftains. I mean, suffering from same issues as basic Orcs, but a bit better unit with a bit higher speed, with a bit better stats, but still I think only C, solid C. Then we have Bellwether Armadillos, pretty much suffering from the same things as basic Armadillos, but the speed is a bit greater, so weak C. Once again, I think Factory can do a bit better. Then we have Sea Dogs, which have that special ability, Accurate Shot, so it kind of feels like tier 4 unit. If it was the only upgrade for tier 3 unit, it would definitely deserve an S tier. But as the unit costs quite a bit, and that accurate shot is not nearly as good as that Mighty Gorgon ability, I think the unit only deserves A tier. Solid A tier, but well, we have quite few in S tier, so let's put them into weak S tier, nonetheless. So that's mostly because of that accurate shot. And these guys actually do have 12 shots already, so that's nice, and no retaliation melee attack. Then let's move to tier 4. This might be a bit controversial, but I will do it anyway. Vampires get only D tier. Of course, moving with flying and no retaliation is rather nice, but otherwise the stats are rather bad. So in my testing, the unupgraded vampires actually perform really badly, even with that non-retaliation attack. So, and mostly, in my opinion, that's because of the slow speed the unit has. So you cannot kite enemies with that. Of course, things get fixed quite a bit with Vampire Lords, which go directly to S tier. So this is really one unit where you should try to kind of conserve the basic vampires to get the upgraded variant. The difference is so big. Oh, it seems I accidentally dragged that. Yeah, so Vampire Lords clearly S tier unit. Then we have automatons. I mean, the unit is relatively fast, and it has that self-destruct ability. So those are really nice, and I think those warrant a solid B tier place for the unit. Then we have Basilisk. I mean, the unit it feels rather bad. Of course, that Stone Gaze ability can be rather nice in bigger battles, but it can also be double-edged sword, as the petrified unit takes only 50% damage when attacked, and of course the attacking unit takes retaliation damage. So, in my opinion, one of the weaker tier 4s, but perhaps that petrification can give some tactical advantage so that the unit can get a weak C tier. Then we have Crusaders. What's nice about these guys, you don't need to get tier 3 building to get these, so that's clearly going for them. I think weak A, and well, the reasoning for kind of going for this unit is that it has double strike, so that's really nice. At the same time, the stats are not that great, so I think A tier, it's a good unit, but not quite on par, for example, with Vampire Lords. And Castle does have quite solid roster in the overall, so it's not kind of depending on this unit. And the speed is not that great, especially for the late game, so the unit will slow down armies a bit. So, I mean, A tier is rather well deserved, but perhaps not quite S tier material. Then we have demons. I mean, the unit feels rather average, and I think it's rather average. It's rather cost efficient, and it has that demon farming strategy going for it. So if it was only by fighting capabilities, I think weak B, but as you can do demon farming with it, I will give it strong B. So somewhere around here. Then we have fire elementals, and now we begin to come to elementals that are suffering from that all elementals being kind of equal thing. So fire elementals, I mean, for tier 4 unit they don't feel that great, and because of that I will give them only strongish C tier. They should have flying, that would improve them a bit, and perhaps a bit better stats, for example fire shield or something like that, but as they feel kind of weak for tier 4. Then we have Magi. I mean, rather solid shooter unit that's buff to spellcasting cost is rather nice. However, Mage Tower costs quite a bit. So if Mage Tower cost was reasonable, I think I would give them strong B. But as it is, I think they will go to a bit on the weaker side of B tier. Then we have Medusas. As I said, I like those beholders more. And for tier 4 unit, this unit suffers from lack of shots, and the speed is not that great. It has that petrifying gaze ability, which can be rather nice, except it's a shooter, so if you manage to petrify an enemy, then you need to spend next turn moving off that enemy if you want to fire. So, I mean, that petrification kind of feels wasted with Medusae, and thus I will give it only weak C. Then we have Ogres. I guess they have many layers like onions, but at the bottom of those layers the unit is really slow, even though it's quite tanky and hits hard, but it's slow, and because of that slowness, and actually Ogre Fort costs quite a lot of wood, I will give them C tier, and you don't actually need that building when you are going for example, Behemoth. So yeah, C tier. Then we have Pegasi. I mean, flying unit, it's a bit on the weaker side, so if AI controls them, it tends to throw them away, but that magic dampening field can be rather nice, so enemy spells cost a bit more, and properly used, I think they can do rather nicely. And of course, the speed, perhaps I already mentioned, is rather nice, so I think I will give them weak B, somewhere around here. Then we have these satyrs, and actually they do surprisingly well in testing. So they can buff, and they kick rather hard. So solid B tier from me. And the speed is, well, it's not great, but it's not that bad either. So yeah, over there. Then we have sharpshooters. I mean, the main issue with this unit is how to get them. So usually you don't have Gelu available. If you do, then clearly S tier unit, but usually you don't have. So if you can recruit them from those dwellings, the supply is rather low. And despite the unit being good one, the numbers in any case will be rather small. And that, in my opinion, decreases the utility and leads only to B tier. And of course, despite the unit can inflict rather nice damage, it's rather squishy, so it suffers quite easily heavy casualties. So I think B tier is fine for it. Then we have steel golems, kind of a unit that you cannot recruit. And, well, overall in battle, I mean, it's not horrible, but it doesn't feel good, mostly because of the slow speed. So I guess C tier is okay for it, as, well, you cannot recruit it, so it's kind of a questionable unit in any case. Then we have Stormbirds, flying unit, with relatively nice attack and relatively nice speed as well. I think solid B tier. It seems we are having quite solid B tier overall in this tier list. So let's see if we need to move some units up and down at the end of the video. But yeah, rather strong unit. Swordsman feels rather. I mean, in combat, it feels relatively average, so you should try to get those Crusaders instead of the Swordsmen. What I don't like in this unit is the relatively slow speed, which will slow you down. And because of that speed, I will give them only strong C. Then we have Archmagi. This might be once again controversial, but I will give them only C tier. And the reasoning is that in order to upgrade Mage Tower, you need to have library. And library costs dirty amount of resources, and as Tower is rather resource heavy city, you need to conserve those resources for something else quite likely. And getting upgraded Mage Tower is not mandatory. In battle the unit does great, and of course that's -2 to spell cost is rather nice, especially if you are casting low tier spells. But those requirements are just dirty expensive even for Tower in my opinion, and that drags the unit down quite a bit in my books. Then we have Housit, I think a contender for the best tier 4 unit, because if it kills one enemy in a unit stack, it gets another attack. Really high speed for tier 4, and the stats are rather nice, high growth. So I think in one-on-one based on weekly growth, I would count on these Auschwitz to take on Vampire Lords even. but perhaps that has to be tested. But clearly these two dominate tier 4 unit rankings. Then we have energy elementals, and for them I think once again a weak B. I mean, they move through teleportation, that's nice, the speed is rather decent, but once again in fighting capabilities it's tier 4 unit, upgraded tier 4 unit. It doesn't do that well against other enemy units. So yeah, I think B tier is rather fine for it. Then we have Greater Basilisk. The speed is improved somewhat. So that's at the very least nice, and that petrification can also be nice. Perhaps once again B. Yeah. Let's put them over there. So next we have Horned Demons. They kind of feel, once again, average unit, a bit better than demons in battle. However, for demon farming you usually get those basic demons, so I mean it kind of feels a bit higher speed, a bit higher stats overall, but I mean if you can upgrade them after farming those demons, then nice, but I think I will put them a bit lower here overall because, well, higher costs, etc, etc. Though this unit is one of the most cost efficient ones in tier 4, so that's at the very least is going for it, but if there were no demon farming, then basic demons would be over here somewhere, and thus these would be higher, but because of the farming I think this ranking over here is okay, at least for me. Feel free to disagree in the comments. Then we have Medusa Queen. Once again, I think pretty much the same applies to these as to the basic Medusas. Of course, they have more shots, so that's really nice, or more ammo. At the same time that petrification applies, and the unit is relatively slow, it's relatively clunky, it's kind of clumsy unit. So I don't like it. I will give it only solid C. Then we have Ogre Mage or Ogre Magi. Well, at the very least it's not quite as bad as Ogre, so the speed is increased. It can buff friendly units with Bloodlust, so that's rather nice as well. And it's one of the tankiest tier 4 unit, if not the tankiest. Of course, it has difficulties in getting into battle. I mean, perhaps B, weak A, and of course the kind of the building chain is not optimal for it. So if that building chain was a bit better, I think weak A, but as they are something like B over here. Over here, yeah. Then we have Sentinel Automatons. I think these are rather solid units. No retaliation attack. I think these can actually beat Vampire Lords one-on-one. Of course, the Vampire Lords cannot have life drain on these. So, yeah, strong A, that's self-destruct, so you can use these as suicide bombers. And, well, I mean, I like the unit, and of course you can repair them with mechanics and engineers, so, and the high speed, if I didn't mention that already. Strong A from me. Then we have Silver Pegasi. The speed is the first thing that comes into mind from these. They have that magic dampening field, so enemy spells cost more. So it feels kind of a tactical unit. In player hands it can shine, but in AI hands it most likely YOLO charges you and gets killed in turn 1. So kind of feels a bit tricky. I think I will give it solid A tier, but that's with the kind of the assumption that it's solidly controlled, because, well, poor control will result in poor performance. Then let's move to tier 5. First we have Lichis. I like that Death Cloud ability, and its Necropolis is only shooter, so I think strong B. And then we have Power Lichis. I think they deserve a place in weaker A. Perhaps I should give these guys weak A as well. Yeah. Yeah, over there. So as you can manually target that death cloud, it's rather nice, and of course your undead units are immune to it unless you target them specifically. Gives kind of flexibility for the unit, so I think rather solid A tier unit from Powerliches. Then Earth Elementals, I think one of the top contenders for the worst unit in the game. Perhaps not quite as bad as Walking Dead, but not quite far either, clearly D tier material. Then we have Fangarms. Once again, a bit feeling like tactical unit. The stats are not that great, the speed is rather poor for tier 5. Then again, it can hypnotize the enemies, so that's nice. Then again, the availability is rather... well, you have difficulties to obtain these unless you get Horn of the Abyss. So, I mean... I guess B tier, somewhere around here. And mainly because of the availability. If this unit was available, for example, Cove, then I think it would clearly go to A tier. But as it's rather rare to get these guys, I will give them only B. And it's a tactical unit, so getting those hypnotizes working properly can be a bit difficult, so yeah. And the stats are not that great in battle, in my opinion. Then we have Genies. For these, I think I will give C tier. The unit doesn't perform that well. It doesn't have any special abilities. And the speed is not that great either. It's rather on the weaker side, so you should wait with these and try to get the upgraded variant. Of course, it's flying and it can hit relatively hard, but it cannot take much beating back until it starts to suffer quite heavy casualties. Then we have Gold Golems. I mean, once again, a rather weak neutral unit. I will put it in D tier. You shouldn't get these unless you really need to. So yeah, I think that's enough said. Then we have Gorgons. Another unit where you should try to conserve these so you can get Mighty Gorgons. The unit building chain can be relatively expensive, but I think Mighty Gorgons will be worth it. But these, I mean, in battle they kind of feel average. The speed is relatively slow. So I think C tier is rather good place for them. Then we have Minotaurs. I mean, the basic variant doesn't do too well in battle in my testing. And of course the speed could be a bit higher. I think it already has a bit higher morale, or positive morale all the times. That's really nice. But I think once again the upgraded variant will be quite a bit better, but perhaps C will be a bit too low, so let's give them solid B nonetheless. Then we have Monks. I think these are one of the weaker tier 5 units. I mean, it's a shooter, so that's really nice. At the same time, the stats are not that great, so I think it gets a C tier, but not at least any higher. So yeah, solid C for Monks. The thing going for them is that Monastery is required for Portal of Glory, so you kind of end up having these guys no matter what as playing with Castle, so yeah, but C tier nonetheless. Then we have Pit Fiends. I mean, the unit feel to be a bit on the weaker side, so not that great. I think C tier for it too. Melee unit that doesn't have that great stats. Of course, if you hit enemies with it, it can deal rather nice damage, but once again, its defensive capabilities and hit points are rather meager, so it will take casualties rather fast. And of course, you cannot use this unupgraded variant for demon farming, so C tier from me. Then we have Rocks, kind of important for Stronghold. Easy to get, kind of carries quite often strongholds early game, as you can get access to these at the beginning of week 1. So I think rather solid A-tier unit. Let's put them there. Then we have Sandworms. I think this unit's performance is not that great in battle, so once again you should try to conserve these and get the upgraded variant, which will perform really well. Of course, teleportation movement is nice, the movement is not horrible, not that good either, so I think some solid C tier for these. Then we have Sea Witch. Well, that's nice that it can cast that disrupting ray. But if you are fighting with bigger armies, that disrupting ray really is not that great. And overall, the unit kind of feels it cannot do well enough in terms of damage, and it cannot take beating. So, of course, it does have that special ability, and it's a shooter, so those things are going for it, but it kind of feels weak, and I will give it only C tier because of that. Well, at least over monks. Let's put them over there. Then we have Zealots. For these, I think, well, a B tier, a bit higher speed, so that's nice, and a bit better stats. Still nothing to write home about, really, but I think solid enough shooter, and I don't think it actually has melee penalty, so that's at least nice. So, yeah, perhaps a defensive unit overall, because it will slow down your main army. Then we have Dendroids. First, the Dendroid Guard. I think it was Guard instead of Soldier. Yeah, Dendroid Guard. It really suffers from slow speed. It hits hard, and those it roots enemies in place, so that's really nice, but the slow speed hurts it rather bad. So, clearly a defensive unit, but it hits hard. The only problem is that it needs to do something, or you need to do something for it to be able to hit anything rather hard, so speed is 3. Then we have Dendroid Soldiers, a bit higher speed, a bit better stats. By the way, applying to both of these, they have rather high growth, so that explains at least something. I think I will give these Dendroid Soldiers rather solid B tier. The speed issue is somewhat mitigated, but the unit is still a defensive one. And, well, it hits hard and it can root enemies in place. Then we have Magma Elemental, not quite on the bottom of D tier, but I think not good either. So clearly suffering that all elementals are trying to be rather equal, and this is tier 5. Yeah, D tier. Then we have Master Genies. Actually, they are the fastest unit of Tower, so Tower really needs them, and even one of them can cast a buff that lasts 3 turns. So if you have 3 slots, just divide this stack and see your Titan or Master Gremlin stack or something like that grow in power rather nicely. The survivability of the unit is rather weak, so it cannot do that well in battle, but I think because of the high speed and the ability to cast 3 buffing spells per stack can be rather important. I will give them a strong A or weak S, and as our S tier is lacking, I think I will give them that weak S. Then we have Mighty Gorgons. I think one of the best tier 5 units. I was about to say tier 7 unit. It's a tier 7 unit killer, so that's its dedicated job in Fortress roster. That terrible case can be rather nice, and I think it deserves a place in solid S tier. Mostly because of that special ability. And of course, it's kind of feels relatively sturdy, so it doesn't die from the first bad look from the enemy. Then we have Minotaur Kings, positive morale always, moves rather nicely, hits rather hard. I think solid A-tier material. Then we have Olkoi Kokoi, however you pronounce that, but really a contender for the best tier 5 unit. I think it deserves clearly a place in S tier, so it can consume corpses on the battlefield and gains one special attack or one additional attack for the next attack from one consumed corpse, and that of course means that those corpses cannot be resurrected or anything like that, so the unit kind of keeps the battlefield clean, and when it hits after consuming those corpses, it hits really hard. So a really, really solid unit, but it requires some practice to get used to it, and well, it's a tactical unit. Then we have Pit Fiends, the key unit for Minotaur farming. If it was not required for that, I think it would have gotten, say, B tier or strong C, but as it's a key component for demon farming, I will give it weak A. Then we have Sorceress, pretty much suffering from the same as Sea Witch. Of course, the stats are a bit better, the Disrupting Ray is a bit better, but still, the unit feels a bit squishy. I think I cannot give it over B tier, not even strong B, because the unit feels kind of... it doesn't feel good. You need to protect it in order to it to survive, and it cannot deal quite enough damage to kind of warrant that protection for trying another unit to it. So yeah, I think B tier at the highest. Then we have Thunderbirds, fastest unit for Stronghold. In my opinion, rather useful in battle, easy to access, and that special ability, of course, RNG-based Thunderbolt can be rather nice. I think weak S tier is rather fitting for it. Then we have Trolls, kind of feels pretty much the same as White and Wraith. So it has that regeneration, the unit has higher hit points, so that regeneration can be a bit better, but the numbers will be quite often lacking, and it kind of feels a temporary unit, situational. In the early game it might have a niche, but I mean, it doesn't come high enough numbers or stats that it would warrant kind of standing position in your army, so C tier. Then we have Black Knights. Perhaps the... Oh, actually we are moving to tier 6 then. Yeah, so, Black Knights. I think these are actually one of the best unupgraded tier 6 units. So a rather solid A tier. The speed could be a bit higher. Then again, the stats are rather nice, and that curse can be rather efficient in some cases. So rather solid A tier. Then we have Dread Knights. I mean, top contender for the best tier 6 unit, and clearly S tier material. That death blow can be rather devastating, especially if it triggers in the early battle. And it has that curse ability, speed is increased a bit, so yeah, a really solid unit. Then we have Cavalier. In terms of cost effectiveness, it's a rather nice unit. On the other hand, not quite on the tippity top of tier 6 unupgraded, so I think weak A would fit it rather nicely. On the other hand, rather solid addition to your army, and of course if you have encounter stables in the campaign map, you get free upgrades, so that's nice. And of course, perhaps that should affect the champions as well. I think I will give champions strong A. The speed is nice, and of course the unit is tactical, so you need to utilize that jousting bonus, and with that utilized, if it can use it to full extent, I think it's actually even a bit better than Dread Knights. But of course, that jousting bonus is a bit situational. So, as it cannot utilize it always, I think strong A instead of S or weak S is perhaps fitting for this unit. But really, really solid one nonetheless. Then we have perhaps the opposite Cyclops, perhaps one of the weakest tier 6 units. I mean, it's a shooter, but it does suffer from melee penalty. It can shoot enemy walls. That's a nice addition, though rather niche one. I think the unit is rather bad. C tier from me. Then we have Diamond Golem. Pretty much the same applies to it as to Gold Golem, except it's more... It costs more. Of course, if you are facing heavy enemy spellcaster army or with much spells and spellcasters, then the unit can be rather nice, but overall I don't think it's rather good. So weak, bit on the weaker side of D tier. Then we have F80. I mean, kind of solid. B tier. The stats are not that great, but it has flying. Flying, it only takes 1 hex, which is a bonus in my books. And it's cost efficient. So yeah, I think solid B tier. Then we have Enchanters. I mean, pretty much the same affects these as Sharpshooters. So they are rather difficult to get, but when you get them, they are nice bonus, especially that positive buff that they cast. They have rather nice speed. On the other hand, they are rather squishy, and the numbers you will get will be rather slow or rather low. So yeah, B tier, mainly because of the availability. If you had Draconis or whatever the hero name is, Dracon, whatever, then it would be probably S tier, upgraded from Magi and Monks and Zealots, but as it is often only B tier from me. Then we have Gunslingers. I think one of the contenders for the worst unit in the game, but I think Cyclops will beat it there. That bonus retaliation that actually happens before the initial attack against enemy shooters can be rather nice, but it feels rather a niche ability, so rather small niche ability, because bigger enemy armies do have melee units, and then the shooters are not focusing on these. And in smaller battles, I mean, there might be a bit better options for facing enemy shooters than these, but in some situations they can be rather nice. Then we have Manticores, a rather disappointing unit in my books. Flying is of course nice, but the stats are rather poor or bad, so C tier at most. And I think I will give it D tier because, well, it can still be rather solid, and as the units get kind of higher tier, the hit point pool grows, and the kind of the threshold for suffering casualties increases. So overall, I think that there is a trend that higher tier units will get higher rankings in the tier list, as it should, because then you wouldn't otherwise have motivation to progress in the building chain. But yeah, C tier, rather solid C tier. Then we have Nagas. For these I will give rather weak C tier, perhaps controversial, but my grounds are that the unit is slow, it's expensive, and well, that's no retaliation attack is nice, and the stats are nice, but overall I think that slowness combined with the high price kind of makes the unit feel obsolete, so to say. So once again, perhaps you should try to conserve and get the upgraded variant, which is significantly better than the unupgraded one. Then we have Nixes, or are they Nixai? I don't know. Feel free to tell me in the comments. In any case, the unit doesn't impress me too much. Of course, it takes the hardest edge away from enemy's attack value, but still, I think I will give it C tier only. The speed is rather bad for tier 6 unit. Then we have these Psychic Elementals. I mean, the unit stats are rather on the weaker side. The construction chain is relatively expensive, as you need to have all those elemental altars to get this one. So even though it has AoE attack without retaliation, I don't think the stats are high enough to warrant higher place than C tier. But once again, you should try to conserve this one for the upgraded variant. Then we have Wyverns. I mean, without Serpent Fly Hives, the unit would be on the weaker side of C tier, but because there are Serpent Fly Hives on the campaign map, I think I will give it solid B. Because you can kind of start snowballing the numbers quite quickly, and it's rather easy to get. So at the beginning of week 1, it's possible to get these, so yeah, I think B tier, and only due to the availability of the unit from Serpent Fly Hive. Then we have Unicorns, rather cost-efficient unit, and overall feels rather nice. That blind ability can be rather OP in battles, of course it's RNG based, but overall I think it deserves a place in rather solid A tier. Rather cheap unit and performs surprisingly well in battles. Of course the speed could be a bit higher, but that blind can be really a deciding factor in battles. Then we have Bounty Hunter, upgraded Gunslinger. Yeah. I mean, it pretty much suffers from the same as those Gunslingers. So I will give them a strong C, but once again the unit is rather squishy. Not too many hit points, the stats are not that great, and the ability to retaliate before enemy attack on shooters is rather nice, but really niche. So yeah, only strong C from me. Then we have Cyclops Kings. Double attack on the walls is always nice, but still, once again, the unit suffers pretty much from the same as Cyclops, the basic variant. So yeah, I think pretty much on par with Gunslingers, or rather Bounty Hunters. Then we have Efreet Sultans. This might be a bit controversial, but I'm going to give them S tier. The unit is really cost efficient, it's fast, and it has that fire shield, which actually, well, the fire shield is not that good of an ability, but it kind of adds a bonus. And the unit kind of feels to be a bit tactical because of the high speed, so it's not going to be rushed directly in the middle of the enemy, but kind of must be used tactically. So yeah, I mean, I think this will kind of divide opinions, but based on the testing I have done, I will give it S tier, and it's rather cost efficient as well. Then we have Magic Elementals. I think rather strong unit. Of course the stats are not on the highest tier of tier 6 unit, but that AoE attack all around it is rather nice, and now it has higher speed, it has immunity to spells, and well, the stats are a bit higher, so I think that warrants a place in A tier. Of course, you shouldn't go one-on-one against enemy tier 7 unit with this one, because, well, it will suffer, despite the non-retaliation attack. But among weaker enemies doing crowd control, the unit shines really over there. And of course it takes only 1 hex, so that's a bonus in my books. Then we have Naga Queens. Quite an improvement from Nagas, but the unit is dirty expensive and it's still relatively slow. So because of that, I will give it only relatively strong B tier. Mainly due to the slow speed, and it's rather clumsy because slow speed combined with 2 hexes, and it's really expensive. Of course, that non-retaliation attack is nice, the stats are nice, but still, the unit it doesn't feel like that I would most definitely want this in my army. So that's the reasoning for giving it strong B. Then we have Nyx Warriors. Based on combat testing alone, with kind of 0 stats, the unit would get perhaps a place in B tier, but as its special ability of kind of blunting the enemy attack value gains more strength as the game progresses and levels are gained. I think I will give them A tier, solid A. The value increases as the game progresses. Initially, I think the unit will start somewhere in the B, but grow stronger as the game goes on. Then we have scope because, I mean, it's rather fast, that's nice, and it has that ability to paralyze. So, based on those, of course, that paralyze is RNG based, so a bit kind of squishy, but still I think despite having rather weak stats, the unit can do rather nicely, especially if you use, for example, 1 stacks and manage to paralyze enemy power stack, then you can, well, fight a battle quite a bit easier. And speaking of paralyzing enemies, we have War Unicorns. I think these do deserve a place in weak S tier. And the reasoning is the blind. The unit is easy to get and it's really, really cost efficient. So a really nice addition to Rampart roster. And that's the reasoning for weak S. Okay, then about Wyvern Monarchs. I mean, in battle they do perform quite a bit better than standard Wyverns. The speed is great. However, if you get them from Dragonfly Hive, you get only these basic Wyverns. So you kind of lose the edge of those fly hives if you get these instead of those, unless of course you have more space in your army. But you need to get to city in order to upgrade these, and that kind of undermines the monarchs a bit. If you could get monarchs from those dragonfly hives, these would go clearly to A tier, but as it is, I think only B tier for that one. Though, and of course the high speed is not that crucial for Fortress as it has dragonflies. So still a solid unit, but not quite as useful as those basic wyverns. Then let's move to tier 7 and perhaps tier 7 plus. First we have Azure Dragons. I mean, with this unit, you kind of are at crossroads. Here is at least one unit where the actual limiting factor in most cases can be the unit price, because the unit is dirty expensive. Then again, if you can afford it, and if you can afford it every week, I mean, in those cases it will be the best unit in the game, in my opinion. But there is that price. I think I will give it S tier, but perhaps not quite the top of S tier because of the high price of the unit. And I think the same applies pretty much to Crystal Dragons. As the unit doesn't fly, that's clearly a minus, but it does generate crystals, so that mitigates the high cost, at least somewhat. So S tier fighting capabilities, but once again a rather high cost. Then we have Fairy Dragons. Well, the same applies to these as to Azure Dragons. It can be rather nice unit to have, but clearly it's not as good as those Azure Dragons, in my opinion. Because the spells, well, they can get a bit random at times, and they don't really do that much damage, in my opinion, especially in bigger battles. But rather nice, kind of feels like missile unit, so strong A tier. Then we have Frost Dragons. I mean, pretty much same as other these high-level dragons. That special ability of corrosive breath, was it? Can be rather nice in some cases. Kind of disrupting ray, but still a dirty expensive unit. And then we get to these kind of normal tier 7 units. First we have Archangels, and they will go to the top of S tier. And the reasoning is that you can keep your army alive when you are not fighting a big battle. So that resurrection can be rather nice. The unit is really fast, it has really good stats, and of course there is that resurrection. So yeah, clearly S tier material. Then we have Ancient Behemoths, a really strong unit. Especially as the game progresses, the unit's value increases as it bypasses enemy defense. At the same time, the unit is rather on the slower side. And of course that 300 hit points is no joke. But that slowness and not being able to fly hinders it somewhat. I'm kind of wondering, should I give it S tier or strong A? But I think as the value increases, as the game progresses, the unit deserves an S tier. So S tier it is. Then we have Archdevils. I mean, it does perform rather solidly in battle. That no retaliation attack is rather nice. On the other hand, the stats of the units are not that great. So it kind of feels once again a bit tactical unit. So you need to keep it away from strongest enemy units hitting it, whereas trying to hit the enemy's strongest units at the same time, if that makes any sense. So I think I will give them A tier, because the unit feels a bit squishy. And yeah, but still, I mean, it's a good unit, and it has highest speed of Inferno units, so on and so forth, but it kind of lacks that some staying power that I'm looking for in the tippity top tier 7 units. Then we have Angels. I mean, solid enough units. That morale boost for your army is rather nice, and the unit overall is rather solid for unupgraded tier 7. Of course, Portal of Glory can be rather expensive, as well as the upgraded variant, of course, but I think it's rather worth it. And the resources are kind of divided. For example, if you compare upgraded Cloud Temple, you need to have those gems really much, whereas with Portal of Glory, you need to have all of those basic, rather special resources. But yeah, they can be rather tricky to obtain in some maps. Then we have Black Dragons. I think they will go to S tier, on the top of S tier as well. Magic immunity is rather nice. In most of the situations, of course, some buffs would be nice to have on them, but you cannot have everything. Breath attack, rather nice speed. And with the latest patch, or one of the latest patches, the requirements were lowered quite a bit, so the upgraded variant or the construction chain to it doesn't even cost that much. Then we have basic Behemoth. It's easy to get, but compared to other tier 7 units, it's not that good in my opinion. So I will give it weak B, but I don't think that it's actually really that good. Yeah, as I said, compared to other tier 7 units. The main factor is the relatively slow speed, and it tends to take damage rather easily from other units, so you have to be careful with these units to ensure its survival, because that upgraded variant will be quite a bit better. Then we have Bone Dragon. Yeah. I think this is the worst tier 7 unit, so C tier from me. The speed is rather nice. It's tier 7 of course, but I mean, one would expect a bit more from tier 7 unit. Then we have Chaos Hydra. If you pit this one-on-one against pretty much any other upgraded tier 7 unit, it tends to lose. But its main job is not to hit single stacks, but to be a crowd control unit. Fortress has Mighty Gorgons for fighting against those elite monsters. So in crowd control, in my opinion, this unit is rather good. And in my books, it deserves a place in A tier. That AoE attack with no retaliation can be rather nice if you can get it into proper place. Of course, the unit is rather slow, it does not have flying, and the stats are not on par with other upgraded tier 7 units. So it clearly has its drawbacks, but in crowd control it can do rather nicely. Then we have basic Coatls. I mean, pretty much the same applies to these as to Bone Dragons. Actually, I will give these a bit lower tier, and the reasoning is that the special ability they have feels rather kind of useless, whereas these negative morale to enemy is rather nice. By the way, I forgot to mention that Archdevils provide negative luck to enemies, so that's another nice aspect, but yeah, perhaps these are the worst tier 7 units in the game. Then we have Crimson Caudals. The special ability of immunity for 1 turn makes these rather nice for hitting the enemy once, but after that 1 strike, when the immunity goes out, their value decreases quite a bit. It's the fastest unit for factory, so that's nice, but still, I mean, the unit feels a bit too weak for upgraded tier 7. And it's not even cost efficient in most of the cases, and of course, if you want to maximize the utility from that ability, you need to use Frenzy or something like that to make the 1 hit really count. But, I mean, it's kind of one trick pony. When it has used that attack, it's not that great, and because of that, I will give it only B tier. Perhaps controversial, but, well, that's how it is in this tier list. Feel free to criticize in the comments if you feel so. Then we have Basic Devils. I mean, non-retaliation attack is rather nice. Negative luck for enemies is rather nice. Then again, I think it's a bit suffers from the same issues as those Archdevils. So the stats are not really that great, and the speed is not quite on the top of unupgraded tier 7. So I think strong B is really good for this one. And you need to be tactical in how you use it, because it will suffer casualties quite easily. At the same time, that non-retaliation attack can be rather impressive if utilized well. Then we have Dreadnought. Once again, I think rather solid B tier unit. Perhaps even a bit, yeah, I think, yeah, solid B tier. And, well, perhaps I should give the Devils weak A, so that we can keep the zoom as it is, and give these actually weak A as well. And the main reason is that they do have that AoE attack, which you can control. That's nice, perhaps not quite as nice as that Chaos Hydra special ability, or rather attack. And the unit is rather slow, but it has rather decent stats, so kind of a trade-off between hitting multiple enemies, and it can do rather decently in one-on-one as well. But the slow speed really hampers it. And in the latest patch, the unit cost was decreased a bit, but still I don't think that warrants higher place than A tier. Then we have Firebird. I mean, the unit is really fast, and that's really nice. And with the special building, it can also get 3 units growth per month or per week. That's rather nice, and I guess we still need to have that zooming out a bit. But yeah, because of the high speed, I think it deserves a place in strong A. Because you get quite often the first mover advantage with the unit, so rather impressive. Even though in battles you should be rather careful in engaging enemy toughest enemy units in one-on-one, because quite often Firebirds may lose those engagements. Then we have Gold Dragons. I mean, perhaps not quite as powerful as Black variants or Black Dragons, but still S tier unit, especially with the latest patch where the building costs were lowered a bit. Immunity to tier 1 to 4 spells, so implosion can be rather nasty in some places, but I mean, breath attack, rather nice speed, etc, etc. I think a place in weaker end of S tier is deserved. Let's put them there. Then we have Ghost Dragons, kind of an RNG unit. If it can trigger that aging, so practically halving the hit points of the enemy stack, it can be S tier. But there is only 20% possibility for that happening. So it's the fastest Necropolis unit, which is rather important, and it has that aging, so yeah, relatively good unit. On the other hand, if that aging doesn't trigger, then it's clearly on the weaker or among the weakest upgraded tier 7 units. So perhaps because of the speed and hopeful RNG, let's put it that way, it will get a place in A tier. Then we have Giants. Based on fighting capabilities alone, with growth, I would give these C. However, you can kind of get these from the campaign map, at least to some degree. So perhaps B could be warranted. But overall the unit is walking, it feels rather slow and takes casualties relatively quickly, in my experience. So perhaps decent B will be the best I can give it. So there. Then we have Green Dragons. Another B tier unit. Perhaps this time a bit more solid B tier. Fire Breath, immunity to some spells. It's a bit more expensive to get. So yeah, that's an issue, but I think solid B is rather well deserved. Then we have Hospice. Rather nice unit. The only downside is that it doesn't fly or teleport. But in battle it's really a menace. So I think I will give it decent S tier. Really, really solid unit. Then we have basic Hydras. I know they do have that AoE attack, but their performance in battle is quite a bit weaker than Chaos Hydras. So I think strong C perhaps, weak B. I think as we have quite many in B tier, I will give them strong C. The speed is horrible for tier 7 units, so it's struggling to get to that crowd controlling it's meant to do. And at the same time, I think even AI knows how to avoid this one, so this really slow speed combined with its crowd control task is kind of a function that does not provide good answer. So strong C from me. Of course, that no retaliation is once again nice, but the stats are rather bad. Then we have Juggernaut. I mean, AoE attack, no retaliation is rather nice, but in most of the cases, this unit doesn't quite perform as well as these units currently on S tier. The unit is relatively slow. Of course, it's rather sturdy, but I don't think it kind of deserves a place in S tier. So let's give it solid A. Solid A tier. Somewhere around here. And of course you need to take into consideration that Factory does have 2 tier 7 units, whereas other factions have only 1, so it kind of feels right that one of their units is not quite on the top of the tier list. Then we have Phoenixes. The fastest unit in the game, so that's really nice. It has that rebirth ability for, was it 20% for the stack size, so that can be rather nice as well. But overall I think the unit was nerfed a bit too much from Shadow of Death to Horn of Abyss. So the growth of 4, or with growth of 4, it would clearly be in S tier, but with the growth of 3 and its current price, I don't think S tier is deserved, or perhaps the lowest end of S tier. because even with 50% higher growth, the unit tends to struggle against most other high tier units or tier 7 units, upgraded ones. So, but perhaps the speed is so important that I will give it low S in any case. So let's put them there. Then we have red dragons. I mean, solid enough unit, B tier, pretty much equal to green dragon. Then we have sea serpents. I mean, the stats of this unit is nowhere nearly as great as those of Haspit. So I'm kind of inclined to give this unit a C tier. Perhaps the highest end of C tier, but C tier nonetheless. The speed is significantly slower than that of Haspit, and the stats are also quite a bit weaker. So once again, you should try to get the upgraded variant to replace this one. And finally we have Titans. I think they deserve a place in S tier. I mean, actually in melee even, they can handle most other upgraded tier 7 units, but then they do have that ranged attack as well, and some immunities, so that's really great. Of course, the unit building chain and the unit itself is rather expensive, but I think it provides the value it costs. So let's see about... okay, yeah. So this is my view of the units in Heroes of Might and Magic 3, Horn of the Abyss. Do you agree or disagree? Feel free to share your thoughts in the comments below, and thank you very much for watching. If you like the content, please leave a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. And if you want to support the channel, consider becoming a channel member. Have a great rest of the day. QualityOldHomm out.